I'm behind, man. Like, what do I need to do to catch up? I should have started investing 10 years ago. Like they said, they were opening up accounts at 18. I'm 30 years old now. Based on all the compounding stuff I see, right? All those calculators people tell me to look at and plug in numbers. I'm 10 years late. So what should I do?
For someone who's young, Dekimbe, just getting started, probably listening to this show, I don't think that's where your focus should be. I think people get distracted about trying to hit home runs rather than when you're 30, just get up and lay down a base hit every time. There's so much free information out there. You can learn a lot when you just get going, but when you hit a level of success in your career, your business, whatever it might be, your finances will hit a level of complexity where it's going to be really helpful to have a coach on your sideline.
We'll be back in 3, 2, 1. We gone. Welcome back, families, to another episode of the First Sip Podcast. I'm your host, Dekimbe Smith. And this week, as I sip on my black coffee, I'm joined by another high school alumni, an old friend, somebody who I was pleased to see reach out and was like, you know what? Let's get an episode going. And right before we got started, man, we had some good energy. And I said, let's stop this right now because I don't want to waste it before we get into the episode. So without further ado, Chris, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me on, Dekimbe. Good to see you, buddy. I know we were just catching up a little bit before this. Love to see what you're doing. Love the energy on the podcast. I've caught a couple episodes at this point. And as I was telling you, took a little trip down memory lane and went back to the beginning last night in preparation of this and heard a little message from the old ball coach. So that was fun. But looking forward to the conversation. Thanks for having me on the show, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And for people who don't know, he's talking about, we went to Pleasant Valley together and we were both somebody who was definitely impacted by good old Jimmy Twig. And if you've ever come across this person, you know that he is full of motivation, full of life skills, life development, everything that you need to just get up and get after it. And that is something that like I said before we started the episode, I didn't want to dive too much, into what it is you were talking about because I wanted to hear you talk about that, right? Like our upbringing, the area that we were raised in, and just giving people an idea of that, because sometimes, right, people know I'm here in Philadelphia, but sometimes they kind of laugh when they say, oh no, I grew up in the middle of the woods, right up in the Poconos, where, a lot of farmland, a lot of rural stuff. Everybody knows everybody. And there wasn't a lot of financial conversations. There wasn't a lot of money making conversations. Let's go out and start this business, do that. And that was something you were touching on right before the episode. So, for people who don't know, right, where you're at now, you're a certified financial planner. And honestly, Chris, when we were back in high school, I didn't even know what that was, right?
I didn't either. Yeah.
My dad was working in banking, right, working for Citibank, and I didn't really even care to ask him about those kind of conversations, right? I knew he was coming in contact with these kind of things, but it just didn't hit my radar. I didn't care. And now fast forward to where we are now, seeing, people like yourself doing what you're doing. It's so interesting to me because it shows you what people can actually do, like how far you can grow from like where you might begin and say like, okay, you put your head down, really focus on one area, find something you're passionate about when it comes to helping people. And now you can make an entire lifestyle about it. So can you give us a little rundown about like what it is that you're doing now to help people?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I'm a CFP, certified financial planner. I got my CFP in 2023. So I work on a private wealth team with Ameriprise out here on Long Island, where I live. Met my wife in college, who was originally from Long Island, which kind of, to your point, Dekimbe, it really opened my mind to a whole new side of the world and the way people lived, right? Where we grew up in the Poconos, I would say this, we had enough, but we didn't have abundance, right? You got somewhere in life because you had a work ethic and you had some grit about you. What I always tell people, right, is my parents are still married today. They love each other endlessly, but every fight in the house is over a $5 bill, right? For no reason, and it just never had to be that way. So from a young age, for whatever reason, I was curious about making money with money. I was working for Jordan Walter's dad in the summers, cutting grass, M&S landscape, right? And so we were just cutting grass, and I opened my first investment account with TD Ameritrade at 18 years old. And I was just putting my landscaping money in there and trying to figure things out. That's kind of the rabbit hole, right? That's what I call that, diving down the rabbit hole. And that was my first foray into investments in the world of, wow, there's a whole other way to make money with not pushing a lawnmower or using your hands, right? Just kind of got really passionate about that. Ended up going to school at Muhlenberg College, studied finance and economics. And I had a professor there, Roger Slane, taught some investment strategy courses. And he just really made the classes and courses fun and interesting. And he showed you how money works, right? He showed you the math behind it, and he showed you it wasn't so complicated if you just understood some basics. And that kind of lit a fire under me. I was able to get an internship at the Bank of New York Mellon at a college. I think that was one of the best things that happened to me going into kind of that corporate world right off the bat. It's a lot of stability there. You got great benefits. You
Hmm.
have a 401k, and I think there's a lot of merit coming out of school at 21, 22, when you're a little green behind your ears, just having some structure, right? It kind of started in the back office there on kind of their operation side of the bank. Figured out my way to get onto the asset management side, and really figured out at that point that I wanted to get onto the wealth side and start helping people with their finances.
Hmm.
Took it upon myself to get my CFP while I was there, and then ultimately found an opportunity out here to join a private wealth team out here in Jericho, Long Island. We have about 700 households under us. We manage over or almost $500 million, if not a little bit more than that at this point. We were actually just recognized by Forbes this year as I think number 143 in the state this year in New
Oh,
York. So we're moving and grooving, man. We love
mm,
what we do. We help people with every aspect of their finances. From kids of clients, right, all the way up to people and their parents and their grandparents. We have clients that kind of span the generations going through retirement. And as you go through different phases of life, there's going to be different financial decisions that come at you. And it's nice to have a coach in your corner who's been there before, or who's explained that to someone 1,000 times, right?
hmm.
And knows what's going on, to give you the comfort that you have an understanding of your options so you can make an informed decision, right? That's really our goal.
Now, I love that breakdown and the way you just mapped out that whole plan for people. I want to go back to right in the beginning where you told me you were working with Jordan Walsh's dad, and at that point you said, okay, you know what, I'm making some money, but let me go ahead and open up an investment account. Now I know it sounds simple to you, right? To say, okay, yeah, you know what, I'm doing this. Let me open up that account. But think back to yourself back then. Do you remember what it was that gave you that idea? Was that a normal conversation you guys were having? Did you maybe like, were you and Jordan talking about investing and stuff like that? Like what gave you that idea? Was it a rich dad, poor dad kind of situation?
No, it was actually I was at a barbecue, and it was one of those dads talking about stocks, right? It was one of those stock guys, stock
Hmm.
jockeys, and I just started picking his brain a little bit. Um, People like that, love him or hate him, right? But he sparked a curiosity in me,
Yeah.
right? And it was just that was it, man. Just kind of lit a fire. You buy that first stock, and then you start getting obsessed about what does that company do? How does it work? Then you see a dividend hit your account. Whoa, what does this mean? What is a dividend, right? How does that work? How does it operate? Why do companies give money to you? And you just dive down the rabbit hole, right? And you start to just that's kind of how I am. I think about a lot of things, right? I
Hmm.
think you're similar in that way, right? I think that's
Yeah.
just kind of how we are. But yeah, that's where it all started, man. I was just taking my landscape and money and learning, right? And it's best to learn with $200 bills, right? Every week, not more than that, right? So because I didn't make a lot of money, I'll tell you that. I
Hmm.
lit a lot of money on fire as getting started. But that's the rabbit hole, right?
Yeah. And I like that you brought up that point too about just letting your curiosity kind of lead the way with it because, you've listened to the podcast. That's a big part of the conversation that I have is sometimes I think we hear a thing or we hear a bit of information and then we get stuck, right? Because we want to evaluate the whole thing. We want to know all the ins and outs, all the X's and O's, make sure we have the perfect strategy instead of like you're saying, you know what? Let me take the first step. Let me see what I can do here. I got a couple dollars that I'm saving. Let me start investing, 5% of it, 10% of it
Absolutely.
here. Let me not throw all my money, down the drain, but let me just
Yep.
see what I can do. Let me start learning about those companies. A lot of people, if you're following, different investor advice, people might say, start looking at some of the companies you already use, right? Look at the things that you're already spending money on. Learn about them. Learn about what their earnings reports are. Learning about how much money they're making. See what, all these different things that go into what it means to really be a shareholder in these companies. And I think that's such an important thing. And that's why I don't like to glance past that when I'm talking to people like yourself, because when I'm having these conversations, right, with people in my everyday life, we look at this as such a big, grand thing. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Let's take it a couple steps back. It really is as simple as go online, open up the account, or make a call, go to your bank, have them open up your account for you, right? And just talk to them. Say, hey,
Hmm.
listen, this is what I'm looking to do. These are my plans over the next 10 years, 15 years. What are your suggestions? And that actually brings me, to my next question here, which is a lot of people, like I said, at this point in their lives, right? They might be 30, looking at other, people around them and saying, Shh, I'm behind, man. Like, what do I need to do to catch up? Right? I should have started investing 10 years ago. Like they said, they were opening up accounts at 18. I'm 30 years old now.
Hmm.
Based on all the compounding stuff I see, right? All those calculators people tell me to look at and plug in numbers. I'm 10 years late. So what should I do? So that's the question I bring to you, because you probably see this all the time is, like I said, people who are stepping into, a newer salary, might get a promotion, bump in their pay. And now they're asking the question, well, what do I do to make more money on this money?
Yep. Yeah, I think the first thing is you got to recognize finances are personal, right? So comparing yourself to somebody else is going to do you no justice, right? You got to work with what you have, where you're at in life, and that's all you can do, right? Um, for people that are just getting going, right, their 30s, I think a lot of people get hyper focused on investment returns, right, and they're trying to go after things that are going to give them the best performance. What you need to be focused on in reality is your savings rate, right?
Mm,
It's really your savings rate while you're young is so crucial, because the biggest generator of wealth when you think about long-term investing is time, right? It's compound interest. It's the eighth wonder of the world. Albert Einstein said that for a reason, right? And so if you understand the law of 72, right, and you understand that if you can earn 10% on your money, right, you could double your money every 7 years or every 7.2 years, just the way the math works out, right? And then you understand that there are investments out there that can get you close to those returns. I'm not going to say every year, right? But there are things out there that can get you returns where you can start doubling your money every 7 to 10 years, right? If you understand that, then your focus should just be figuring out how to get more money into the machine, right? As you're young, and I always say, a compound interest curve, if you look at it on a graph, it goes parabolic towards the outside of it, right? And so you can either kind of crawl along the graph as you start going, right, making smaller contributions to your savings account. Or if you want to get serious, a bigger shovel helps, obviously, a bigger income helps. But if you can find a way to create bigger margins in your finances, I always talk about that, right? Creating margin in your finances is so important. You need more money coming in than you need to pay your bills and to live your lifestyle if you want to build wealth. It's just that simple, right? You need more money to build wealth. And so if you can create more margin, whether that's through increasing your income, reducing your expenses somewhere, it's going to build bigger margin for you to save and allowing you to get up that compound interest curve faster, right? And so if you can start putting more money away, if you understand you're doubling that money every 7 to 10 years, you should get really excited about putting more money into the machine at a young age, right? Less focused on, am I picking the right stock? Am I picking the right fund? Am I in the right stuff? I think people get too caught up in that because that's where the media, you turn on CNBC,
hmm
all the graphs are going. It's not that for a 30-year-old. I really don't think. I think your mindset should be focused on how much can I save right now? Am I saving into the right account types from a tax perspective?
hmm
So I'm thinking about taxes long term, right? But savings rate is just so important because time. There's nothing that's going to trump time on your investments. It's just how it works.
So is that a huge mistake that you're seeing right now from people our age? Is that obviously you're talking about the savings rate a lot, right? But I know, just like I said, from people who just in the last 6 months, I remember because I was reviewing my savings accounts, right? Just my high yield savings accounts, seeing what rates are out there, just towards the end of last year. And then I started asking other people, right? And some other people in my family. And I was surprised once again about the understanding about where we're placing our money. And that's where I'm looking at and saying, like, anybody who's sitting there right now with their money, right, in one of those accounts that are paying you 0.08%, right, 0.8%, whatever it is right now at the local bank, I don't think they really understand how much they're leaving on the table, because they look at it as like, you know what, I'm checking off the box. I have a savings account. When I was still working at Bank of America, that was the thing. It was, oh well, I opened up my savings account. That's what people recommended me to do. But then
Hmm.
you start asking, it's like, well, what's the longer plan, right? And that was a lot of my responsibility there at the time, was having that conversation, bridging the gap for people between their everyday banking and then moving them over to the investment advisors, right? So having that conversation with them, really trying to understand, well, what is it that you're trying to get to? Because right now, I know you're putting a lot of money into your savings account, but it's making you $10 a year, and you have hundreds, thousands of dollars sitting there, and you're making change. And you can do this for years and years and years, and then ask yourself, well, like, they told me to do it. What happened? So is that something that you're seeing as well? Like, people think they're doing something, but then after a while looking at it being like, oh, well, guess I really wasn't.
Absolutely. We see it all the time. One that I tell people, one of the biggest risks for young people in building wealth is not taking enough risk in their long-term investments at a younger age, right?
Mm,
And sitting on cash would be a perfect example of that. You want to have a well-funded emergency fund, right? If things like life insurance, things like an emergency fund, while they're kind of a nuisance to set up and you don't really love the idea of it at first, it makes a lot of sense, right? Because what does it protect you from? Doomsday, right? Last thing you want to do is build that pool of investments to a nice rich pot, and then lightning strikes, something terrible happens, and we got to sell all those investments to recover, right?
hmm
That's the whole purpose of creating an emergency fund, right? And we say, 3 to 6 months of your living expenses. If you want to be a little bit more conservative, you can extend that out 9 months, right? If you're married, to your spouse, you both have jobs that, different than someone who's just got one income, right? There's a different risk level there. So if you have two incomes, you might be closer to 3 months. You might be a little bit more comfortable with that. But the idea is
hmm
build a sturdy emergency fund, right? So if something happens, we don't have to swipe credit cards and we don't have to sell our investments. We can recover, right? We can stroke a check and then we rebuild that. It becomes priority number one again. But the idea is your army of dollar bills. You want to have all those dollar bills working for you above and beyond that, right? So if you're sitting on that much cash, you'd really be thinking about why. What's it doing for me? Because to your point, even if it's in a high yield savings account earning 4%, if your emergency fund's 50 grand, you're sitting on $200,000. You're still missing out, right? Because there's opportunities for whatever is above that emergency fund that we've agreed is acceptable. Those dollars can be working much harder for you. And if you understand compound interest, the law of 72, you understand how you can double your money. You realize how much you're missing out by just not letting your money work for you. It's so
hmm
important to have all those dollars going out every single day and making more money for you.
Now, I want to take a second to dive in on the mental side of this, because sometimes the math is always math for us, right? And it makes perfect sense.
Sure.
I see the numbers you're saying. I see what I can get to. Emotionally, I can't get myself to do it. I can't build up the risk tolerance. I don't have that resilience that you're talking about that I need to go out and do that. How do you get people there, right? Because I know for myself, mindset has been a big thing that I've had to work on the last 10 years, right? We talk about growing up playing sports, but when you're on your own now, there's a lot of hurdles and things you got to keep going through, a lot of obstacles you got to push through. And after a while, you might get pretty timid and say, I don't know if I want to take the risk. Or you might see certain life events happening like we just went through, right, with the pandemic. And you say, man, you see, I really got to keep this stuff close to my chest. I got to hold on to this money because you never know what's going to happen. Look at what just happened to us a couple years ago. So how do you get their mind right? How do you even get them ready to have that conversation?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? So I think 2 points there. You have behavioral and you have emotional,
Mm,
right? Behavioral, I think a lot of that gets solved through just automating your finances, right? Automating your savings, increasing your 401k savings rate from the 3% auto enrollment to something more sustainable. And then you never see the money, and we're humans, right? And so we just get used to living on less. We just figure it
yep.
out. We're very adaptable. And if we just kind of force the savings, right? The work gets done and you don't see the money. You just kind of learn to live on less. You figure your budget out around that. So start setting up those monthly transfers to those savings accounts that need to get fed, right? Automate things, take the guesswork out of it and make sure the work's getting done. We do that with all our clients, right? The emotional side, candidly, if you can't handle the emotions, that's where working with a financial planner makes sense. Having a coach in your corner, and I always use the athlete example. I was a Division III college soccer player, right? You and I used to work out together. We know how to get in a weight room and do exercises, right?
Yep.
But if I want to get into peak fitness level, I'd behoove to maybe hire a trainer, right? Because what are they going to do? They're going to hold me accountable to be at the gym. And when I get to the gym, my workout's going to be ready for me, right? When I'm done with my workout, they're going to tell me exactly what I need to be putting in my body to recover
hmm
and refuel, right? How much sleep to get, right? They're going to be coaching me through the whole process, removing all the emotion from me. Am I doing this right? Am I missing a corner, right? It's not that I don't know how to get in good shape, but having someone who's an expert in all that stuff to basically tell you the next step, the next turn, that's going to take the emotional stress out of a lot of situations for people.
Mm. I like that a lot, and I love the part that you brought up there about just having that extra guidance, that extra coach, because, like you're saying, we do get stuck in our head a lot, and we overthink things, or we may not even know what to be aware of, as we're going through and making our progress and going through our plan. And just having that other person there to say like, hey, listen, you're doing well, but as we go into the next 3 months, this is something I want you to start focusing on. As we go into the next year, this is something I want you to focus on, because this is where the opportunities are. So, actually, that's a perfect segue. Going into this, year where we're at the beginning of a new year, what are some things that you're talking about your clients with now that they should, have their eyes open to, maybe be aware of with certain changes, right? There's been a lot of changes going on right now with the government, certain policies, cutting spending in certain areas. So what are some things that you're saying, okay, we should be aware of this because this may be an opportunity or a threat with your overall portfolio?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's situation is different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a young person, right, who's just getting going, which I know this show is tailored
Mm-hmm.
definitely towards a younger demographic, your strategy should look a lot different than someone who's just getting ready for retirement. From a high level perspective, what we're seeing is obviously we just went through an election, and putting your politics aside, change. The markets are always a little weary of change. You've heard things about tariffs out there, right? We're seeing where that'll unfold. Could that have
Mm-hmm.
inflationary pressures? What does that do to the interest rate environment? All these things are intertwined. But what I will say is the markets are very resilient, right? And the markets have been through elections before that have been contentious. What we know is that the worst time to panic with your investment strategy is during the most pain, right? If you think back to COVID, um, when the world shut down, the markets kind of went into a little bit of a tailspin, right? And it
Mm-hmm.
was very, very
Oh
painful if
yeah.
you were an aggressive investor. If you watched your portfolio go down, it's very painful. But we also saw a very quick recovery coming out of that, right? And so there's a lot of wisdom, and and this goes back to having a coach, right, who's been there before, who can explain to you what's going on. And when you're looking at the walls at night, and you're wondering what's going on, having someone to call and coach you through that so you don't make that mistake. What's the value on that? Not selling your investments at the bottom, because what I always tell clients is then you have to be right twice. Sure, you might be able to get out right before the bottom, but then what else do you have to know? You have to know when to get back in, right? And a lot of times it happens so quick, and you just don't know when to get back in. You just don't, and so if you just stay invested over a long haul, that's typically what works out. Financial planning, as you get closer to needing those funds, you should really be bringing your risk down, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you shouldn't ever be in a position to kind of lose the shirt off your back, right? If you know what your goals are, right, and you know when you're going to need to drive some income off your investments, or you're going to need funds from your investments, that should really drive your investment strategy. And if you need that money in a relatively short period of time, you really shouldn't have it out there leveraged in things that can whipsaw too much, right? And there's homes and places to find that. Obviously, the return opportunity isn't going to be, what you can get in a higher risk investment, but you're going to be willing to accept that if you need more stability. And that's just kind of base level financial planning
Mm-hmm.
investment strategy from a goal standpoint.
Yeah. No, I like that. And it's like you said, that's the fundamental stuff that people need to hear. And talking about the fundamental things, because you were talking about before about just getting to the point where you kind of set it and forget it when it comes to your finances, automating those transfers, automating the payments that need to be made. And I remember back when I opened up my first 401k, and somebody told me the same thing. They said, okay, listen, you'll get this percentage matched by the company as long as and you can do up to this percentage, right? And they'll match up to that. And I heard that and I was like, okay, it sounds good. And I'll tell you, I probably invested maybe my first year there, maybe 1 or 2% of my salary, just because I didn't take the advice. Second year, somebody sat down with me and they were like, the same conversation we're having here, you are literally leaving free money on the table from a company match. And I'm just like, okay, well, let me go ahead and try it out. Let me take their advice, right? Maybe they're onto something here. And man, when you say compound growth really is the eighth wonder of the world, it was such a crazy thing to see. I checked my account after like 6 months and I couldn't believe, and it wasn't, guys, I'm not talking about tens of thousands of dollars, right? But just, you're talking about somebody who's just stepping into their first, real salary, first full-time job, like you said, and you got that structure, you got that security, and now you're seeing your money making money. And I'm
Yep,
like, wait, I didn't have to work for this. I just
absolutely.
invested in that account. I set it aside, and now I'm checking back months later, and there's a good amount of money in there. And like you're saying, if you're invested in the right things, if you're open up to a little bit more risk, then the possibilities really could be pretty fruitful for you. But it's
Yeah.
going to be different with every person, right?
100%. And
Mhm.
that employer match is one that's table stakes, right? Where else are you going to get 100% return on your money? And that's
Mhm.
certainly not in the stock market consistently. Go find me it. If you can
Mhm.
find it, I'd love to know.
Yeah.
And you see people miss that opportunity all the time, right? When I got out of high school, it was a mission, right? And it goes back to where we came from, right? I mean, my parents, they live in Penargel now. They're doing just fine, right? But retirement is kind of Social Security and a small pension from my dad.
Mhm.
Nothing crazy.
Mhm.
They're when I met my wife in Rockville Center, it was eye opening. Dekimbe, you'd laugh. You show up, there's nice cars and driveways. They got sidewalks, right?
Yeah.
It was wild.
Mhm.
Trains, planes, and automobiles, the whole
Mhm.
nine. And then you get a job in New York City, and it's like, whoa. And I was like, it just doesn't have
Different.
to be this way. So I was putting, I was living with Burkay at the time,
Okay.
in Rego Park. He put me up for 9 months rent free,
Mhm.
and I shredded a loan that I had from Muhlenberg because if I paid it off in a certain time, there's no interest, a couple thousand, I banged that out
Mhm.
and just hammered the 401k. 25% of my income was going in, and then people were laughing at me, And but to your point, the employer match. I look back, I think I was there 5, 6 years. You know, I never put a dollar more into my pre-tax account because all my money was going into the Roth account, right?
Mhm.
So I have a pre-tax IRA that is tens of thousands of dollars now. That's just from Bank of New York Mellon's contributions, right? So if you're missing that, that's an easy opportunity. It's an easy win. And it feels trivial at first. And
Mhm.
that's what you have to get over. It feels monotonous when you're making those $100, $200 payroll contributions, just getting started. You look back at your 401k like, wow, 2,500 bucks, You look back a couple months later, wow, $8,000, I tell my clients you got to get to the boiling point, right? You learn it
Mhm.
in elementary school. What temperature does water boil? 212 degrees, right? You got to get there, man. And then it gets fun because then your money starts to work harder for you than you can work with your hands, your brain, your mind, your voice, right? Your money's just cranking. You get to a quarter million, you get a 25% return in the S&P 500. If you're an aggressive investor and you're levered to the equity markets, your investments are going to really start to work for you, and it gets a lot of fun. That's when you can probably
Yeah.
get addicted to it. That's when clients want to start saving more. They see how it's starting to work, and that's when it gets fun.
Like you were saying though, it goes back to that same. And I like to bring up fitness analogies a lot because I feel like a lot of people do understand that fitness, sports. There's there's that point where you're working out, you're going to your plan, and you're just not seeing results yet,
Mm-hmm.
and you're doing the trivial stuff. You're doing the mundane stuff that is just
Yep.
boring. It is so boring. It's so simple, but it's so. But if you stay consistent with it, that is where the magic happens, right? You just
Absolutely.
brought up the whole concept about water boiling, right? At 212. Well, if you stop at 210, it ain't gonna boil. 211, you might be close, but and that
That's it.
one extra push, right, is going to be the change for you. And that's the thing that like I say, I love these conversations so much because not only is it a reminder for the people who are listening, but it's also a reminder for myself as we go through this, right? Building our businesses, just developing ourselves. Sometimes we get stuck in just in that mundane. We're looking around like, man, I've been doing this for so long. You probably have your weeks where you're sitting there making calls and it's just like, oh gosh, I do not want to make this next call. But that next call might be might be that next big opportunity for you and your business, right? It
Absolutely.
might be the next big conversation for one of you and your clients. But if we never have it, if we just get stuck in our head and say, oh, well, let me try something else. That's where we lose the success. That's where we lose the sauce. And that's the thing that I'm realizing, like I say, right now, where I'm at in my life. If I look back on the last 10, 12 years from when we left high school, I've gone through that roller coaster of, okay, well, yeah, let me try it out. Push, 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 push. I'm not liking it, right? Let me go the other way. Or this is getting a little bit, harder or more boring than I thought it was going to be. Right? I thought it was going to be more exciting than this. So let me go find something more exciting because in the beginning, a lot of things, right, are fresh and exciting and it keeps you there. But then
Yeah.
once you're in there a year, 2 years, 3 years, you start asking yourself, it's like, maybe there's a better option for me. Maybe there's another investment that can get me a faster return. And like you said, now you gotta, strike magic twice and just hope that you're gonna get lucky instead of just
Absolutely.
keeping up that consistency. So I love that you just brought up the whole idea of just doing the trivial work because it is it sounds so simple, man, but that really is the secret.
That's it, man. I think you got to level set with yourself, and anything worth doing in life, I tell my wife all the time, 7 to 10 years, right? It's going
Mm,
to take 7 to 10 years before you can really look back in the rear view and say, was that worth it? Did I do a good job? Did it pay off? And the other thing too, if you're just getting started, right? I'm a big believer in you don't got to get it right. You just got to get it going, right? You were an athlete, you played for Coach Twig. I mean, you realize just do the basics really good, right? Do the basics really, really good and get really good at those things, and you will find levels of success. And then what you realize is you start to find levels of success, you get even better. And those basics, you start learning new skills, you start learning new strategies, right? And when you first get going, to your point, it's so hard to just get in a lane and stay focused. People just lose focus, and it's so hard to stay focused on one thing for more than
hmm
30 days for a lot of people. And when your finances command a lot of focus for a couple of years if you want to get going, at a young age. And it's
Yeah.
never been easier either to spend your money, right? I mean, you could tap your watch on a kiosk now and out goes dollar bills from the bank. It's never been easier.
hmm
And that's why structuring your finances in an automated way where you pay yourself first is so important, right? People have that in reverse order most of the time. That's why they stay broke, is they're not paying themselves first, right? If you pay yourself first and live on the rest, you force the savings, you force the scarcity in your lifestyle, you create the margin that you need, and the work gets done. If you go out, you spend the money on your lifestyle first, you pay all the bills, you do this, you do that, and you save what's left. Most people are saving crumbs, and that's the problem, right? If you pay yourself first and you reverse that order, you're just setting yourself up for a much better chance of success.
hmm Yeah. Now, I love that you talk about the pay yourself first
Mm-hmm.
mentality, because I was talking to David before about the profit first model, by Mike Michalowicz. Is that something you're familiar with that
It's
book?
not, no.
So he has a book. It's honestly, it's really just a modern day version of like the envelope system, right? When it comes to budgeting, right? So just kind of like you're saying, making sure that you're doing certain things, you get your income in, pay yourself first, put aside some money for savings, right? Make sure you're saving for taxes. Then let's look at the operational expenses, and then what else you got to spend on your personal side, right? So you really are just creating that structure again, and it really does help a lot of entrepreneurs as well. I guess a lot of times people who might have a job, it's a little bit easier to have those structures because some of these buckets are set up for you. But
Mm-hmm.
especially on the entrepreneurial side, people who are in small business, God, things can get confusing, right? And I don't know if you work with a lot of, business owners as well, but
Sure.
you probably see some things that make you be like, all right, we gotta clear up a lot of mess here because, man, and I was just having, like I said, the conversation with David. My first 2-3 years in this business has been nothing but figure it out, figure it out, figure it out, course correct, because
Yep.
there really isn't an easy blueprint out there that won't also cost you a lot of money. And when you're starting out in business, you have to be aware of where every penny is going so you can get to that point. So that's something like when I look at it, like just like you're saying, being structured with that, having the right system set up so you can put your money in, it is a game changer. But and that's why I'm bringing up that book more, because it was recommended to me by Kalia on the other episode with the Sankofa Properties, and she was saying that's something that really helped them just get everything together so you can start making money and seeing where your money's going. Because,
Yep.
like you said, it's one thing when you're getting a regular paycheck, but it's another thing not saying, okay, well, let me wait until this next invoice is coming in, from some work I did 30 days ago. But at the same time, expenses are still going out, and now I got to account for all these things. It's a lot. So,
Mm-hmm.
are you also having a different conversation with business owners when it comes to their money management? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's definitely a little different with business owners. I mean, with the business owner, right, your emergency fund needs to be much larger, right? That cash cushion needs to be much bigger,
Mm-hmm.
because your business could sustain months of poor sales, poor revenue. Something could happen, you get sick, whatever, right? And that's your main source of income. So, we're going to want to have a substantial cushion there. And the whole point of that is so you can weather those storms and not get blown off the strategy that we're doing for your personal self, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of financial advisors will say, "Oh, I work with, regular people and I work with business owners." Like it's some genius idea, but guess what? Business owners also have the goal of retiring one day for the most part. That a lot of business owners want to send their kids to college, right? A lot of business owners want to grow their wealth, right? And so they're not all that different. Now, where the difference is there's a lot of opportunities for them to save on taxes because the IRS writes the
Mm-hmm.
tax code in a preferential way for business owners to incentivize that. But and I got to give a shout out to Don Mamorato. He's another CFP down outside of Philly.
Yeah.
We actually went through CFP together. He was he kind of steered me down that road. And if you know Dom, he doesn't take no for an answer.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I was
Dom
just
and
talking
I,
about him the other day.
yeah. So we talk all the time about this stuff. It's what we love. And for people who are just getting going, right? You talk about that structure, right? First and foremost, make sure you have an emergency fund set up for yourself. The last thing you need to be doing at a young age is getting into credit card debt. That's compound interest working in reverse order against you, right? That's 25. We're seeing cards now. It can be up to 30% interest
Hmm.
rates. That's going to hold you back from getting loose on the other side of the compound curve, right? So make sure we have a good emergency fund. And then a basic structure, Dom and I always talk about is 80-10-10, right? Or 80-20, right? 80% of your income is probably going to pay for your expenses, living expenses, right? If you can save 20% of your income, that's a great start. It's a great start. 10% of that, steer that into some sort of tax advantage retirement account. 10% of that steer into a liquid account that you maintain access to, right? The idea there is those retirement accounts, they're going to get some preferential tax treatment, right? So you're diversifying the tax drag on your investments, but you can't touch those accounts till you're 59 and a half right now,
Hmm.
right? So if we want to have access to some of our investments to fund those goals before we get to retirement, we need to start building money outside of those accounts in a liquid investment account. Those accounts can be invested in a similar manner, however you want, but it's a very basic structure to get going, on a wealth building journey, right? It's
Hmm.
not complicated. And I think people overcomplicate building wealth. It's not that difficult.
Yeah. So, what are those, to get really specific and tactical for people? What are the, like, let's say the top two liquid accounts that you should have right now?
Yeah. A taxable brokerage account, right? And a high yield savings account, right? Nothing wrong with either of those. I'll say this disclaimer: I can't make any
Hmm.
recommendations. So certainly not a recommendation for any personal situation. But when you think about a liquid account, right, just having your money sit, your emergency fund sitting in cash is not the end of the world. It's where it should be. That's the whole point. Is having some liquid cash available to insulate you from worst case scenario. Now we do want, it's part of your army of dollar bills. We want that money working as hard as it can for you. But the idea isn't to expose that money to any sort of volatility or
Hmm.
potential loss, right? So having it inside a high yield savings account is going to protect it with FDIC insurance, right? While still getting you kind of top dollar interest rates of what's available out there in the marketplace. Then you have just a regular taxable brokerage account. And that's that investment account that you can invest money for a longer term goal, right? Get that money growing at a higher rate of return, but you have access to that money if you need it for any reason without penalty, right?
Hmm.
So if we need to fund something that's going to happen before retirement, if we have the goal of purchasing a second home in 20 years, if I'm 30, that's when I'm 50. I can't go to my retirement accounts yet. So if we want to start building a fund for that house goal, right? We need to build that outside of our retirement accounts, and that's the way you can do it.
Love that. And then moving on to the retirement side, right? The things that we're going to save, we're going to touch that when we're 59 and a half, preparing for retirement. What are the things that you feel like every person should, when they're done listening to this episode, I need to make sure I have these two or three accounts set up and ready to go?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you work for an employer, you may have access to a 401k, a 403b, and most of those plans have a Roth or a traditional side. General financial planning. Who's a Roth? What is Roth account? How does it work? A Roth account is funded with after-tax dollars, meaning it's money you've already paid taxes on. When that money gets invested into a Roth account, it's a Roth 401k, a Roth IRA, whatever it might be, it grows tax deferred. You don't pay any taxes while that money's in the account on any interest, dividends, or capital gains that are generated from your investments. Once you pull the money out in retirement, it's also tax free. So it's a really powerful tax savings vehicle if you use it correctly. The traditional side of those plans, 401k, a traditional IRA, also known as a pre-tax account, you're actually taking a current year tax deduction for those contributions. The money still is growing tax deferred while it's in the account, but you've never paid taxes on that money yet because you've taken a deduction. So when you retire and you pull that money out, you have to pay taxes at that point. And so when we think about at a high level, who's a Roth account better for, right? It's better for someone who's younger, likely in a lower tax bracket now than they will be down the road, right? So you want to fund that account while you're in a lower tax bracket, electing to pay taxes now. And then that money is going to compound for a longer time, right? So it's going to have a bigger kind of wealth multiplier effect. Those dollars that you contribute while you're younger are going to work the hardest for you. So if we can
Hmm.
shelter a lot of that compound growth from taxes indefinitely, there's might be some merit to think about that. Who's a pre-tax account, well suited for typically someone who's in their peak earning years, right? Someone who's in a high tax bracket who needs to take advantage of those tax offset opportunities, right? Take advantage of those deductions, find expenses. If you're a business owner, someone who's in their peak earnings years is going to want to find opportunities to save taxes. That's where, you might want to start thinking about funding the pre-tax account.
Mm.
And then there's always merit in just diversification 101,
Yeah.
right? Because we don't know where tax rates are going to be when you retire. No one knows, right? So if we just want to diversify our tax risk, and I always, it's just diversification. You want to roll into retirement with some money in each of those buckets, right? So we can actually control how much income you show each year, right? And we can control what tax bracket you're in and how much taxes you pay. And that's the whole goal when you roll into
Mm.
retirement.
Yeah. And
Yep.
like you were saying before, that's where things really get to the point where I personally believe people should look for that advice, right? When you're looking to make that long-term strategy to plan all that stuff out, pull yourself out of the books, people, and all the articles and the headlines, and just make the phone call. Like I said with the conversation with Dave, make the phone call because it'll save a lot of time, a lot of years, a lot of
Listen, I
wasted
think,
energy.
what I always tell people is there's so much free information out there. You can learn a
Hmm.
lot when you
Hmm.
just get going, but when you hit a level of success in your career, your business, whatever it might be, your finances will hit a level of complexity where it's going to be really helpful to have a coach on your sideline,
Hmm.
and help you avoid major mistakes that can cost you a ton, help kind of shine the light on areas of the closet that are a little dark that you haven't seen before,
Hmm.
right? But if you're just getting going, there's nothing stopping you. I mean, it's never been easier to open an investment account and start funding that. There's incredible amounts of information out there now. You just have to want to get serious about saving money and getting going. But once you hit a level of success, you're going to start paying a lot of money in taxes if you're not smart, right? And you're going to have decisions to make that you're probably going to want some guidance on.
Yep. 100%. 100%.
Yep.
And that is the thing too. I wanted to bring up before because we're talking about guidance and there's a lot of things that are getting crazy. It just reminded me of when we were talking about opportunities before because people are asking questions about crypto right now, right? And they want guidance around that. Should I be exposed to that as well? So I wanted to save this for a final point. And also I had another question too that I wanted to bring up because we have a lot of friends who are having kids right now at this point in our lives. And they want to know, right, how can I start putting money aside for them? So those are the two final questions I wanted to end it on right now. But let's start with the child planning first, and then we'll end the fun stuff with the crypto, right? What are your
Yep.
thoughts on that? But for child planning, right? What are you recommending to people? Are we doing 529 plans? Are you recommending to business owners, right, start paying their kids and doing that kind of stuff? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, 529s are great, right? If you want to plan for education specific purposes, 529s really are a great solution. They operate very similar to a Roth IRA for education purposes, right? So by making contributions, also a lot of states provide a state tax deduction as well. So as a parent, you can take a little bit of a rebate on your state return in most states. And then that money is effectively a Roth IRA for education expenses. So you're getting that money invested when they're young. It's growing tax deferred. There's no tax drag on that money. Therefore, more of your contributions down the road are actually going to be able to pay for those education expenses rather than be clipped off and sent to the IRS, right? Very, very powerful solution. A lot of parents have concerns over overfunding these accounts. What if the kids don't go to college?
Mm-hmm.
These accounts are very portable throughout the family, so you can swap funds from child to child. If the family grows, you can set it to siblings. It's also a great legacy planning strategy if you want to hand 529 assets down to grandchildren, things like that. You can also pull money out now to fund a Roth IRA for your children if there's some unused funds in there. So there's some rules around it. That's where working with someone who understands what they're doing can help. But a 529 is a great solution for education. You can also open something called a UTMA account, Uniform Transfers to Minors Act. It's basically a custodial investment account, right? And you can kind of bolt that on to a 529, right? There, you have less restrictions of what you can use the money for. And so if you want to build some assets outside for things outside of education, you want to save for their Sweet 16, you want to do some things outside of just education expenses. That's a great option. It's basically an investment account that can get invested no different than anything else for the child's benefit. And you as the parent are the custodian on the account, making the decisions on that account, overseeing the account for your kids, right? Um, I think that's a great strategy, right? You got
Yeah.
education and you got liquid investment account. If you want to put a little savings account together, that's fine. Just to kind of start showing the kids as they get older the power of
Hmm.
savings, just behavioral stuff, right? And I think that's
Yeah.
so important. Talk to the kids about money from a younger age, dumb it down for them. Um, so that's kind of where I'd land on college planning. If
Hmm.
start when they're young, it's because it's compound interest, right? The money you put away when they're born is going to work the hardest for them. If you
Hmm.
want to start saving when they're 14 to go to college, that's great, but you're not going to do as well if you started saving when they were 4, right? You're going to have a lot more money ready for college if you started that $50 monthly contribution when they were 4 rather than waiting to save $400 a month at 14. Just
Exactly. Yeah.
compound interest.
Hmm.
Um, that's kind of where I'd land on the education piece, the child piece, the crypto piece. I'm not gonna go out on too much of a
Yeah.
limb here. What I'll say is this, right? Clearly, it's making people are using cryptocurrency, right, for real
Hmm.
transactions out there. There's a market out there. We're not making any recommendations to clients right now. It's
Okay.
a very volatile asset class.
Yeah.
So I would say, just like anything, know what you're getting into, right? And if you can't handle the wild roller coaster, then it's probably not for you.
Hmm.
Because the biggest risk in crypto is, are you going to be able to withstand some of those downfalls? And is it ever going to come back? No one knows. And so we'll see where it goes. Like I said, I'm not gonna kind of put one way or the other. I would say do your due diligence on that. Understand what you're getting yourself into. Understand that it's typically a very volatile asset class, and just know where you're putting your money. It's important
Yeah.
for someone who's young, Dikembe. Just getting started, probably listening to this show. I don't think that's where your focus should be. That goes back to, I think people get distracted about trying to hit home runs rather than when you're 30, just
Yeah.
get up and lay down a base hit every time, and just don't get out, right? Just don't pop up, just lay down a base hit. And that will do you wonders if you can do that through your working career, kind of
Yeah.
limit lifestyle creep to the best of your abilities. I'm not saying don't have fun. You get a raise, man, go celebrate. You worked hard for it, right? Live a little bit, but make sure as you get those raises, you're also raising, your savings rate accordingly, right? If you're spending more money on car payments each month than you're spending into your investment accounts, we got to talk, right? That's a problem. We got
Hmm.
to get that mindset shifted, and that's where you'll start to see your wealth take off and be successful.
Yeah. And I love what you just finished off there, because that is really a thing, right? We do have to make that shift. We have to start asking ourselves the questions and being like, all right, what am I doing? Is this going to be beneficial for me in the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? Or am I going to look back and be like some of the conversations I know we've all had them with older people in our lives? When they said, man, if I would have done this back when I was your age, right? Or if I would have invested back in this, such and such. And after a while, we have to start asking ourselves,
Yep,
well, am I going to be that person who starts
absolutely.
looking at, right, like myself 20, 30 years ago and be like, man, if I had only done those things, blah, blah, blah. And that is truly one of like my deepest fears, is to like not just let time go by and just not even explore certain opportunities or certain things, because you never know if you just don't try. If you don't make the attempt,
Absolutely.
you don't just go after and say, you know what? I don't know 100% about what's going to happen here, but let me at least put one foot in front of the other and start walking my way down that path and see what comes about it. Right.
Absolutely.
And yeah.
You don't got
Hmm.
to get it right. You just got to get it
Hmm.
going, right? And I
That's
think
it. Yeah.
one of the biggest values of a good financial advisor is nothing other than maintaining discipline throughout
Mm.
your life, right? Maintaining the financial discipline that's necessary to build wealth. I always say we can get off the train at a period in time, but we can't get off the train for too long, right? And
Yeah.
that's my job is, hey, life's going to throw you a punch at some point, whether it's you lose your job, you get laid off, or sickness hits the family. Like, we got to get off the train for a little bit, right? We got to bring the 401k savings down to nothing for a little bit. That's fine. Hopefully we have an emergency fund built a little bit to help us weather the storm, but we got to get back on the train, right? So it's just
Hmm.
discipline, right? Discipline. You don't got to get it right. Just get it going in the right direction. Start taking it seriously and do the little things well. Get really good
Yeah.
at doing the little things, and it'll take you wonders, man.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. And this brings us to the final section of the episode. Every week, we like to do a content rec of the week, right? So when I'm having my interviews with guests, I like to see what you guys are checking out, whether that be a show, a book, a movie, whatever it is, right? But what you were just talking about there reminded me of my content rec. But I want to hear what you got in store for us.
Yeah, so I think a good show for at least finance related, certainly the Money Guy podcast is a show that I
Okay.
listen to.
Hmm.
It's just gives you a lot of good basic stuff. So these guys, they break down. I think they're doing it different, just giving a lot of free info. And that's what I talk about. If you want to get learning about this stuff, there's a lot of podcasts out there that can
Yeah.
educate you on the basics of personal finance. So Money Guy Show is great. I'm reading a book right now called Unreasonable Hospitality. I was actually gifted that book by Louis Leiterman, who
Okay.
is another PV grad. He's a chef
Yeah.
now, owns his own
Hmm.
restaurant down in
Yeah,
Phoenixville,
he's not too
Rivertown
far from here.
Taps. Absolutely. And, that's just a book about going above and beyond on client experience, right? And making sure that that's kind of top of mind. And so I've been enjoying that read. I would definitely recommend that as well.
Definitely. And I got to reach
How
out to
about you?
Lewis too. Yeah, I'm going to reach out to Lewis because I see he's got a new restaurant to open up soon. So yeah, like you said,
Yeah.
man, it's so cool to see what people are doing from such a small town, right? See people
I was
branching
down
out.
there a couple of months ago,
Okay.
with Dom, and I'll tell you
Hmm.
what, man, I had a smile on my face the whole
Yeah.
time. You're sitting in this cool restaurant,
Hmm.
and one of your friends who went to high school was behind. He owns this place, and
Yeah.
everyone's just ordering food, drinks, and
Hmm.
it's awesome, man.
Yeah.
It's really,
Yeah.
really cool, to see him doing. He's gonna, I think, looking to launch another location as
Hmm.
well. So he's getting it done, man. He's
That's
hard
awesome.
attitudes never crumble, right? So he's
That's
getting it
awesome.
done.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's great. And bringing it home to my recommendation of the week, I actually got the book right here behind me. Grab it here. So you were talking about self-discipline, right? And just being able to stay on track. And this book was recommended to me from one of my mentors, somebody who I met here in Philadelphia 10 years ago now. And he was somebody who came to me at a point in my life and was asking me, he was like, so, a lot of your friends are going to be graduating college. I didn't graduate college and I couldn't afford to finish out. And he was just like, you're here, you're doing sales, you're in a good position, you're on a management track, but what do you really want from yourself? And I will never forget that conversation because I was at work on a Sunday, sitting there at my desk, making calls to people on a Sunday who nobody wants to talk to anybody about sales on a Sunday, right?
Right.
It's one of those things where you're scratching your head.
Yep.
It's like, this can't be it. This can't be it for me.
How did I find myself here?
Exactly. And when he had that conversation for me, man, everything, like, I just started looking at so many different things. Like I said, just opening up your eyes to other opportunities, getting more courage in the moment. Cause at that point I was just comfortable, right? I was making good money in my job. I had, a title. I was cool. I was chilling, right? I
Yep.
didn't have that much more supervisors over me, day to day stuff that I had to worry about. So I'm just like, okay, I'm cool. But then after that, I'm just like, wait, I'm leaving opportunities on the table. Forget about money. I'm just leaving opportunities on the table. Like, get up, man, and go do something else, right? Like, go explore what else you could be stepping into. And I spoke to him about a week ago, and he recommended this book, No Excuses, by Brian Tracy.
Awesome.
And it really talks about everything you were just talking about there, which is just that power of self-discipline, right? Getting off of this, this, what he calls this idea of someday I'll, right? Where it's like, oh, well, someday I'll do this, someday I'll do that. And, well, eventually I'll get into this point. And we just keep coming up with the excuses. And then we find other people who have the excuses. And then now you're just in the whole excuse party about never doing things or like wanting to stay away from stuff. And basically says, like, if you can just reclaim that discipline, right? Like, understand like who you truly are, like where your power is, it becomes so much easier to just to deaf all that noise, right? Just to mute all that and say, okay, what do I have to do to be able to accomplish my goal? Who do I need to find? Who do I need to surround myself with to get there? And that's why I say it was so, just right on time hearing you bring up discipline, talking about those things, the trivial tasks that we have to do daily, because that really is the game changer. And I think anybody who's listened to this episode,
you
right,
couldn't have said
can
it any
hopefully take
better,
that
man.
away. Yeah, because that's the
Absolutely.
thing that I say. Everybody, every week we talk about this stuff. Just look at yourself, ask yourself, okay, what's the small little work that I'm avoiding that's turning into big problems now in my life? Because if we can narrow those down, then we'll probably start seeing a lot more progress. And that is, like I said, something we're going to continue to talk about. We're big here on personal finance conversations, big here on investment, right? Wanting to build ourselves a better life because enough of us are sitting here struggling, stressing out about money, and just wanting more, right? Wanting more opportunities for ourselves. So, Chris, once again, thank you for joining me. Any final words for the
Thanks
people?
for having. I would just say this, man. You don't got to get it right? You just got to get it going. Um, you know, Business is under construction. If I could be the motivation source for you to get going on your personal finance, give me a shout. This stuff isn't as complicated as people make it seem, so get one foot going in front of the other. I love what you're doing with this podcast, man. Keep up the great work. Like I said, I've been crushing episodes. It's been fun to hear what people are up to back from the Pocono streets. And yeah, man, let's keep building. Let's keep doing it.
Yeah, man. This was great. This was great.
Absolutely.
So much
Awesome.
good information, so much good practical information. Guys, go ahead, take those tips that we talked about, review your accounts, do what you got to do. If you have questions that are relevant to what Chris can help you with, like I always say, reach out to him, reach out to me, right? We'll get you the answers, right? That's what we're all about here, is getting you the answers that you need to help you build a better life. So, guys, until next time, stay tuned, stay curious, and as always, enjoy your first sip.